Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Study Circle HISC Seerah session 175, which is the 8th session that we're doing on the Conquest of Mecca. Just a very brief review of how it all started, because it sort of comes back later on in today's session, inshallah. So going back to session 168, we talked about how the conquest of Mecca happened. Essentially, it was the Treaty of Hudaybiyah being breached, so the nullification of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which was a 10-year-long peace treaty, and that was because Khuza'a were massacred by Banu Bakr. Khuza'a were allied to the Prophet ﷺ, and Banu Bakr were allied to the Quraysh. This was on top of an internecine conflict between Khuza'a and Banu Bakr over many years, and this resulted in a nighttime massacre of about 20 people of the Khuza'a. And that was a direct breach of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which allowed the Prophet ﷺ to nullify the Treaty of Hudaybiyah and then to march on Mecca, having voided the treaty, and to conquer Mecca because of that. Won't go into the other aspects of the things that we've done in the other session. We did after that how the Quraysh, they panicked and sent Abu Sufyan to try to negotiate an extension. We talked about how the Prophet ﷺ gathered the army, but Hatib ibn Abi Baltaha, one of the elite Sahabi from Badr, he tried to tip off the Quraysh. Then we also talked the week after that about a couple of other converts to Islam, some of the last people who did hijrah, and we'll come back onto that inshallah today. And that was Al-Abbas bin Abdul Muttalib and some of the cousins of the Prophet ﷺ who converted as the army was marching. Then we did how Abu Sufyan became a Muslim, how he was captured along with Hisham, Hakim ibn Hisham and Bilal, and they became Muslim. Then we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ then entered with his 10,000 strong army into Mecca, overwhelming force, and Khalid bin Walid just put down a little insurrection, but the three flanks of the army essentially captured the whole of Mecca. Last week we did how the Prophet ﷺ then entered into the Kaaba, cleaned out the Kaaba, cleaned all the idols from around the Kaaba, and basically gave his victory speech as conqueror of Mecca. We talked how the Quraysh were one of the main motivations for them resisting the message of the Prophet ﷺ is because the message of Islam is a threat to their supremacy, their privilege, their way of life, and their power and wealth. So they would fight against the message of Islam. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted to cancel out all of those privileges. And he did that in his inaugural speech at the doors of the Kaaba. Again, very symbolic gesture, opening the doors of the Kaaba, standing there, addressing everybody, essentially saying, there's a new man in town, there's a new regime in town, and everything that you used to do before that you thought was religious or that you thought was acceptable as a social norm, all of those customs have been cancelled, apart from two customs which Prophet ﷺ explicitly said these will continue. And those customs from pre-Islamic times, Jahiliyyah times, are custodianship of the Kaaba, the keys to the Kaaba, and feeding the pilgrims. So these, other than those, all other customs were abolished. And Prophet ﷺ, in his victory inaugural speech, reinforced the sense of brotherhood in Islam, how that is important, and the supremacy of taqwa, defining your relationship with each other through your closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he essentially he freed the Quraysh, he released them, quoting from Surah Yusuf, as Yusuf said to his brothers, "You are the freed ones." And then he returned the keys of the Kaaba to Uthman ibn Talha, and the keys to the doors of the Kaaba remain with Uthman's family since then. Then we also talked about the blacklist of people. So although the Prophet ﷺ gave explicit instructions to the army on entering not to fight and only take up arms if you're being attacked, and that's what Khalid bin Walid did, he did, however, have a blacklist of people who were not part of that general amnesty. And that was mainly due to blasphemy or just visceral, vehement anti-Islamic propaganda or cursing or leaving Islam and becoming apostate. And people on this blacklist included Abdul Uzza bin Khatal, who killed a Muslim and then became a non-Muslim, and he was killed despite hanging off the cloth of the Kaaba. Makyas ibn Subaba and a slave girl who used to curse the Prophet ﷺ, and al-Harith, they were executed, but others who were on the blacklist were eventually forgiven, and these included Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahal, Abdullah ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Sarh, and Habar ibn al-Aswad and Wahshi. So that's where we did it last week. And so just continuing still on the day of the conquest, some other stories. One of the other important things that happened, which again most of us are aware of, and it is almost poetic justice, and Allah works in these. Sometimes Allah demonstrates His supremacy with these acts of what we would say is poetic justice, but it's divine justice. And there's a maxim that some of the scholars have used about this, which is al-jaza'u min jins al-amal, which is essentially however you deal with people, that's how you're going to be dealt with. So the way you interact with people or with society, that's their way of getting back at you, essentially. So, some would say this is an analogous concept to, what some people call qismat, but basically good for good, bad for bad. So al-jaza'u min jins al-amal, jaza actually has a double meaning. It can mean reward and punishment. So when we say, for example, Jazakallah, in the linguistic terms, Jazakallah could either mean may Allah reward you or may Allah punish you. So we shouldn't just say Jazakallah, we should have it with the good. So Jazakallah khair. So may Allah reward you with all that is good. So this principle is good for good, bad for bad. And the reason why this sort of poetic justice is that the Prophet, after giving this khutbah, this bayan to the people of Mecca, he instructs Bilal ibn Rabah to stand on top of the Kaaba and to be the very first muazzin to give the adhan on top of the Kaaba. And again, this is just full of symbolism. The Prophet, he's standing on the Kaaba, he's addressing the people, and then he's asked Bilal to stand on top of the Kaaba, so probably the highest point in Mecca, and to give the adhan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored Bilal to be the first ever muazzin in Mecca. And this goes back to not just the fact that he had a very powerful voice that could, carry far and wide, and that's one of the reasons why Prophet instructed Bilal to be the first muazzin in Medina. But also it wouldn't be lost on the people of Makkah that Bilal, who was an Abyssinian slave, and he's literally on the highest point in Makkah, addressing everyone else with the call to prayer. But also, it's folklore that how Bilal, used to be punished and tortured in the streets and valleys outside the Kaaba. And so during his torture he would say, Ahad, Ahad, there is only one, there is only one. And we talked before about how his voice would be reverberating around the streets of Makkah, in the valleys of Makkah, because of the torture he was getting, and he was sticking firm to testifying there is only one Allah. So Allah then chose the Bilal to be the one to have the honor of doing the Adhan, the very first Adhan in Makkah. So as he's doing the Adhan, there was a group of elite from Banu Makhzum. And we talked about Banu Makhzum. This is the tribe of Abu Sufyan bin Harb. So Abu Sufyan, he's there with Itab bin Usaid and al-Harith bin Hisham. And these are the elite. They are, proud noblemen. And al-Harith bin Hisham, he is the full brother of Abu Jahal. So these are the cream of Bani Makhzum, and they're listening to the Adhan, which is to say, I'm sure you can just imagine it reverberating around the streets. And Itab bin Usaid, he, after seeing this, says that Allah has honored my father for having him be dead right now, so that he doesn't have to see the humiliation of how this black man has been chosen to be above us. So a very, very sort of, again, racist and curt response to sort of the changing of the guard. He's basically saying, I'm glad my father's dead, so he doesn't have to go through this humiliation that I'm feeling by having this black slave, talk over us. So Al-Harith, who's also there, he says, Wallahi, if I thought this man was on the truth, I would follow him. So meaning the Prophet ﷺ. So saying, look, I've been against the Prophet ﷺ for 20 years for a reason, right? This is the full brother of Abu Jahal. So you've got Itab and Al-Harith. They're just this banter amongst themselves, and they're trying to draw in Abu Sufyan, who is one of their own, and until that morning he was leader of the Quraysh, leader of the Mushrikeen. But Abu Sufyan, he became a Muslim early on that morning. So they're trying to drag him into it, but then Abu Sufyan, as I said, who is a brand new Muslim, he says, well, as for me, because he's this banter going on, and then sort of he doesn't want to get caught up in that, criticizing what's going on. He says, as for me, my tongue is sealed, and if I were to say anything, even the rocks would inform the Prophet ﷺ of what I said. So he's indicating that, look, my sympathies are with you. I get what you're saying, but I can't say anything, because if I do, these rocks and stones, they would snitch on me to the Prophet ﷺ. So he is starting to have that firm belief in the nature of the prophethood. But he's saying, look, I feel your pain. He's not telling them off. He's not chastising them. He's just saying, look, I can't say anything, right? And then shortly after that, the Prophet ﷺ, he goes by the three of them, as they're still huddled together. And then he turns to them and says, I know exactly what you said, the three of you said. And he goes, as for you, Al-Harith, you said such and such. And as for you, Itab, you said this. And as for you, Abu Sufyan, you said that. And he verbatim said what all three of them said. And then Al-Harith, obviously hearing that, and again, this is the era before people are bugged, before you can listen in, right? This is the era that, you don't have these superstitions or these fantastical events happening. There is only one explanation. And then Al-Harith says, Wallahi, you must be a prophet, for nobody was listening to our conversation. And then he accepted Islam there and then on the spot. And then Itab later became a Muslim sometime after that. And obviously Abu Sufyan's already a Muslim. And again, this sort of just reinforces the concept that Allah talks about in the Quran, where he's addressing the Bedouins in Surah Hujurat, where he says, "Oh Bedouins, do not say you are mu'min, true believers, but say you are Muslims, those who have accepted Islam, and Iman has yet to enter your hearts." And again, we'll talk about some of this next week, inshallah. But there's a distinction between saying you're a Muslim and being a good Muslim or a true Muslim, or having the sense of Iman directing your actions. So here you've got Abu Sufyan, who literally has just become a Muslim a few hours ago. And obviously he can't be steeped in Islam with the same way as the Muhajir. He doesn't have that understanding. He doesn't have that deep, philosophical, nuances of what Islam's about. So say you're a Muslim, but, don't say you're a mu'min just yet. So there's that distinction. And again, these people, Al-Harith, who we just mentioned, it says, the brother of Abu Jahal, if I thought this man was true, then I would have already followed him. He goes on to become a strong Muslim, and he dies a shaheed in the Battle of Yarmouk, which is one of the very famous turning points in Islam, where Islam then was able to spread through to the Roman Empire. And Al-Harith, he is the one who, as a new Muslim, and if you've come across new Muslims, they have lots of questions about lots of detailed things, which people who grow up as Muslims take for granted. And Al-Harith, he came to the Prophet ﷺ once, and he asked him specifically, how does wahi, revelation, actually come down to you? So he's curious about these things, and this is like a new Muslim. He has that ability to see things like that, or to have the courage to ask those questions, because you want to have stronger faith. And again, when you hang around new Muslims, it's good to encourage them to ask these questions, because then you can sort of reevaluate some of the basics of your own understandings and beliefs. But he's basically saying, tell me, how does revelation come? And the Prophet said to him, and again, we've talked about this before, in the 6 or 7 different ways that wahi comes down. He says, sometimes wahi comes down to me like the ringing of a bell, which the Prophet finds the hardest. And sometimes Jibreel comes to me in the form of a man, and then I can understand what he says, and that is easier for me. And then sort of shortly after this, on one occasion when wahi was coming down to the Prophet ﷺ, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he sends out the call, says, go and find Al-Harith. And so they find Al-Harith, and they bring Al-Harith, and he lifts up the tent, and he can see the Prophet ﷺ, how he is as revelation is coming. So that's his way of, the Sahabi's way of saying, look, you ask the question, there you are. That's the living manifestation of how it comes down in the Prophet. And again, we've talked about this, how he would, go into a certain posture. He would close his eyes, and sometimes, and then you could almost see the weight of the revelation coming down on him, beads of perspiration would fall. So the Sahabi would recognize that, and again, when that happened, they called for Al-Harith to see how that happened. And again, as I said, he became a strong Muslim. He died in the Battle of Yarmouk alongside Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, and there's another famous little story of them two dying, and Ayash ibn Abi Rabia also breathing their last at the battle. So that's Bilal giving the Adhan. Then, still on the first day of the conquest, going back to the introduction where I talked about how the Khuza'a were attacked by Banu Bakr, the Prophet ﷺ, he then turns to Banu Bakr, who are obviously in their own regiment, and that was the cause, the casus belli, of the annulling of the treaty. So he turns to the Khuza'a and he says, you have between now and Asr, and only Asr, to exact revenge or retaliate on Banu Bakr. Right? So he's basically saying, look, we annulled the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which allowed the conquest on this premise. Knowing how tribes can hold grudges, I will give you permission to retaliate on this one occasion. But you've only got between now and Asr. So literally only a few hours, right? Exact the revenge you want, and that's it. End of story, case closed. And so after that, there'll be no more fighting. So then, he's giving them permission to do revenge, and then that's the end of the story. So they can't then keep bringing this up later on. And again, it's a masterstroke of genius to allow them to do that. And then it is a question of drawing a line in the sand, drawing a line under the whole matter. And then later on, he says, there will be no more fighting or bloodshed. And after this, the Haram will be returned to the sanctity it had. And then inadvertently or somebody the next day happened to kill one of the Khuza'a, and the Prophet got really angry one of the people of Khuza'a killed one of the Banu Bakr, and the Prophet got really angry about that, and then he gave another really stern khutbah and said that the one who does it, it shall be permissible for the family to extract qisas, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, blood money. So either they can take the blood money, or they can ask for the death of the person who transgressed. And then he goes on to say, if anyone tells you that the Prophet himself fought and shed blood in the Kaaba, you need to say to them, and again this is the hadith, you need to say to them that Allah has allowed the Prophet and he didn't allow you, and Allah allowed this for a small portion of the day, and now it is he has returned it to its sanctity. So basically making it very explicit that on this one occasion there was bloodshed that was allowed around the precincts of the Kaaba, but this was a specific exemption to the sanctity of the Kaaba, and it was only for a limited time period. So you can't use this, as a sunnah or as a precedence in law to allow other excesses for this. So again, the Prophet is making clear that, although this precedence has happened here, this precedence cannot be allowed to be used as precedence for future legal purposes. So that's again what happened on the day of conquest. Another couple of small stories. Okay, no, just finishing off that, the next day when somebody did transgress, it's narrated by Ibn Abbas that the Prophet said, Allah has made Makkah a sanctuary, so it was a sanctuary before me, and it will continue to be a sanctuary, a haram after me. It was made legal for me for a few hours of the day to fight. It is not allowed, and this is the general khutbah, it is not allowed to uproot in the haram any of its shrubs, or to cut any of the trees, or to go hunting to chase game, or to pick up fallen things, except by a person who would announce it, what he has found publicly. So again, he's setting the new laws on redefining what being a haram is. You're not allowed to kill. And again, this exception was allowed for this one occasion, and it's only for a few hours. And he's saying that you're not allowed to uproot any trees or any shrubbery, right? Or to cut any trees, or to chase any game, to go hunting. Or if you find a thing on the floor, you can't just pick it up and say it's yours now. You have to announce it publicly and then give the owner time to reclaim it. So he's stating these rules of what a haram is. And then Al-Abbas, as the Prophet is giving this, he says, "O Allah's Messenger, allow us the lemongrass tree, for it is used by our goldsmiths and for our homes." So the Prophet then says, okay, fine. An exception will be given for the lemongrass tree, that you are allowed to cut that down. And so these are the general rules around being a sanctuary. And again, you can still cut trees, but you do need to have a specific reason and request permission for that. It's not a blanket, you're allowed to cut any trees down. So again, when when people were expanding the haram, they were allowed to do some of these things. But again, as a general rule, the ordinary person can't uproot any shrubbery. A couple of other small things, and one is a story of Abu Qahafa. And Abu Qahafa, he is probably one of the oldest men in Mecca at the time, and he is one of the staunchest enemies of Islam, and he is the father of Abu Bakr. So Abu Bakr, his father is Abu Qahafa, and he went Abu Qahafa was very angry that Abu Bakr became a Muslim, and was very angry that Abu Bakr sided with the Prophet ﷺ. And we talked before about how when the Prophet ﷺ did the Hijrah, took Abu Bakr with him as his companion, Abu Qahafa was really angry that Abu Bakr would leave, as he would say, abandon them with nothing. And then we talked about how the daughters of Abu Bakr, they filled up a pouch with stones to say, don't worry, he's left us all this money. And then Abu Qahafa, he sort of jangled that leather pouch, and he said, yeah, okay, fine, fair enough. But Abu Qahafa didn't leave them anything. But Abu Qahafa, as I say, he was very anti the Prophet and anti-Islam. On the morning of the battle, because he's blind and elderly, he asked his daughter to take him to the top of the mountain. And this is before the conquest. And then he asked his daughter, tell me what you can see. And she goes, look, I can see a mass of black. And Abu Qahafa says, well, that they are the horsemen getting ready to attack. And then he goes, what else can you see? And she describes, well, there's a man moving, between them. And Abu Qahafa says, well, that is the person who's giving the orders to the cavalry ready to attack. And then Abu Qahafa says, now what can you see? And she says, well, now we can see the mass moving. And Abu Qahafa says, well, that is, they've received the orders and they're dispersing and they're getting ready to attack. So then he tells his daughter, take me down, let's go quickly before we get caught up in the attack. But he's blind, he's elderly. As they're coming down the mountain, they get intercepted by some of the cavalry. And then as they get intercepted, one of the horsemen because this is war now, and he doesn't know who Abu Qahafa, he doesn't know the daughter of Abu Qahafa, the sister of Abu Bakr, and he sees that she's wearing a nice necklace. So this person, he grabs the necklace and rips it off, and he takes it off as his own personal sort of war booty. Then later on, when she sees Abu Bakr, she complains of this incident of Abu Bakr, that one of the horsemen, they came and they took my necklace. Abu Bakr, he then addressed the people that were there, and he says, has any of you done such and such? This is, my sister, or some reports my daughter. Can any of you give back the necklace? But no one admitted to giving back no one admitted to taking the necklace, because these things happen in war. So Abu Bakr turned around to her and said, just have sabr in this, and you'll get your reward from Allah, because there is little trust amongst the people on this day. Because obviously this is war. He's just saying, basically, it's a tense situation. So I was going to own up to making this mistake. Just, put your trust in Allah and take the reward of this from Allah, which is what happened. Then later on, I'm not sure if it happened on this day, but it could have happened on this day, because the Prophet, he stayed in Mecca for about 19 days after the conquest. But it said that Abu Bakr, he was brought to the Prophet by his granddaughter Asma bint Abu Bakr. And then she's leading Abu Qahafa by the hand to meet the Prophet. And then when the Prophet sees Abu Qahafa, he turns to Abu Bakr, because obviously Prophet, he sat with his viziers, his trusted generals, Umar and Abu Bakr. But Asma brings in Abu Qahafa. So the Prophet turns to Abu Bakr on his side. So why didn't you leave the old man, the sheikh, and we would have come to him in his own house. You didn't need to bring him here. So again, this is the Prophet giving respect to his best friend Abu Bakr, and said, look, there's no need to bring your father all the way here. I would have been happy to go to see him. And again, the Prophet is showing that it's okay to show respect to our elders or our noble people. And again, this references one of the hadith the Prophet talked about, where he says, he is not one of us who does not show respect to our elders and mercy to the youngsters. And so you are allowed to treat people according to their rank, essentially. So the Prophet says, look, you should have left him, I would have gone to him. And then there's a short conversation that happens between the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Qahafa, and eventually Abu Qahafa, he accepts Islam and becomes a Muslim. And the Prophet ﷺ then turns and it said Abu Qahafa, because he's one of the most elderly people there. He's got it said he had pigeon white hair, so his beard and his hair was pigeon white. And again, we talked before how in one of the previous circles how having white hair was seen as a sign of respect and wisdom, and people would sometimes have pride in that. The Prophet, he tells the women folk who are taking Abu Qahafa away, when you go home, change his whiteness, right, but avoid black, right? So get him to dye his hair, but don't make it jet black like he's pretending to be youthful. So the scholars have said that it's encouraged, if you've got that sort of jet white, when you've got that white hair and you're old, that you are allowed to dye it, but avoid being jet black, or avoid your natural color. Choose a slightly different color or hue for your hair. So that's the hadith. And then as they're taking Abu Qahafa away, Abu Bakr is crying. And so the Prophet turns to Abu Bakr and says, "Why are you crying? You know, it's a happy day for you. Your father is accepting Islam." But the Prophet knows from Abu Bakr, this isn't him crying as in tears of joy crying. He knows this is crying as in a pained crying from Abu Bakr. He says, "Why are you crying? You should be happy. Your father's accepted Islam." And Abu Bakr says, "Ya Rasulullah, how I wish the hand I am seeing now is the hand of Abu Talib." So Abu Talib obviously died, a mushrik, and he's saying, I would sacrifice this moment that my own father will become a Muslim for your uncle to be in his place and to be accepting Islam. And he's crying because he wants to see the pleasure of the Prophet, and he knows the Prophet would take more happiness in Abu Talib becoming a Muslim than his own father. And so that's why, and again, you can sense the bond between Abu Bakr and the Prophet, that Abu Bakr is pained because he wanted the Prophet to be happier than he is happy, in that generation. And again, we're talking about the generation of the Abu Sufyan, the generation of Abu Jahal, the generation of Abu Talib and Abu Qahafa. That generation of people, Abu Bakr is saying, "Look, I would have sacrificed this moment, right, my own father, for Abu Talib becoming a Muslim." And then we'll do another conversion story that probably happened on this day, although some say it may have happened the next day. And this relates to a little story of Ummi Hani, bint Abu Talib. So Ummi Hani, she is the cousin of the Prophet. She's a female cousin of the Prophet. She's one of the daughters of Abu Talib, we just talked about. She's the full sister of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So Ali, the son of Abu Talib, his full sister is Hani. So Hani binti Abu Talib, again, a cousin of the Prophet. So some say she remained a pagan and some say she became a Muslim beforehand, but she's now a Muslim. But there is some aggro that's going on between her in-laws and Ali. So Ali wanted to kill a couple of her relatives. The conquest of Mecca has happened. People the Muslims have entered into Mecca. These two relatives, her in-laws, know that Ali ibn Abi Talib has a particular beef with them. So they flee at the moment of conquest. And they're worried that Ali is going to get revenge on them personally. So then they flee, so they hide. So Ali can't do that. And then they seek out Ummi Hani and they take refuge in her house. And then she, gives them her personal protection. I give you my protection. Well, they come to her and say, "Can you protect us from Ali?" And she goes, "I give you my protection." Then Ali knows that they're going to be there, so he goes to Ummi Hani's house and he basically says, "Give them to me. I want to sort them out." And it's a day for settling your scores. And then Ali gets angry at his sister. "How dare you come between me and them?" And then she said, "Look, I have given them protection," right? But Ali wouldn't accept that, but she locked the door and she gave them protection. So some say she went the next morning, some say that this was later on that day. She went directly to the Prophet and because she's the Prophet's cousin, she could go into the chambers where the Prophet was. And it was saying at that point in time, as she walks in, the Prophet he's taking ghusl. And then his daughter, Fatima, she's sort of shielding the Prophet from everyone else with a cloth. and it's saying that the tub in which the Prophet ﷺ was taking a bath, ghusl, still had some dough in it, some dough marks of dough. And again, of course, they're not going to have proper shower facilities in those days. So the Prophet ﷺ was doing ghusl, and then he hears somebody coming in, and so he asks, "Who is this?" And then Fatima was looking over the cloth, and then she says, "It's Ummi Hani," and then the Prophet says to her, "Wait there," and she waits there, and so she's waiting there, and the Prophet ﷺ then finishes his bath, and then he takes after he finishes his bath, he prays 8 rakah, and each rakah as 2 rakah. And Hani, she narrates this hadith that she says, "I saw him pray 8 rakah," and she goes, of Salat al-Duha. So this is said by the scholars, this is the only known hadith or strong hadith we have where somebody themselves narrates that they see the Prophet saying that, where they see the Prophet praying Salat al-Duha, right? And so the Prophet has talked before about the benefits of praying Salat al-Duha, and Salat al-Duha is generally after the sun has risen over the horizon. Some say by a meter's length. So you can see that it's after Fajr, the sun has risen, up until the start of Dhuhr by about 5 or 10 minutes. Any time between Fajr, essentially Fajr and Dhuhr, you can pray Salat al-Duha. You can pray 2, 4, 6 or 8 rakah. And the Prophet in another hadith said, whoever prays 4 rakah at the beginning of the day, that will be sufficient for him for the rest of the day. So 4 is recommended, although 2 is the minimum for Salat al-Duha, and you can pray up until 8. But Ummi Hani, she says, I saw him pray 8 rakah of Salat al-Duha. Once he's prayed, he says, what's the matter? And then she goes through, well, this is what's happened. Ali wants to kill them. I've given them protection. What do you say? So the Prophet said, we shall protect anyone whom you want to protect. So basically saying, and again, we've talked about how any Muslim, even a child, can give protection to other people, right? So, and so he agrees with her giving protection, goes, we give protection to whoever you give protection. So she could then go back to Ali, her brother, and say, the Prophet, he's agreed with my protection, and I've given protection to these 2 people. You can't kill them. So Ali has to accept that. And then later on, these 2 people come and they profess their Islam. So that's the story of Ummi Hani. We'll finish there, and next time, inshallah, we'll talk about where this is still the day of the conquest. We'll talk about where the Prophet stayed. His property, Khadija's house, and the house of Abu Talib, they've all been sold off, and other people are there. So where does the Prophet stay? We'll talk about that, inshallah. Next time, we'll also talk about some other famous sayings, like there's no more hijrah after the conquest, right? Although linguistically you can still do hijrah, from a Sharia perspective, you're not going to get the benefits of the hijrah, where you are guaranteed Jannah. And again, up until now, it was fardu ayn, it was compulsory on all Muslims to migrate to Medina. So that ruling gets abrogated. And then we'll talk about some of the other hadith. Some of the other people who become Muslim and the bay'ah that people give, inshallah. So until next time, inshallah, jazakallah khair for listening. Do remember the ummah and us in your du'as. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم.